Todos muito bem-vindos. Eu sou a Geisa, professora e coordenadora de pesquisa do campus de Juiz de Fora. Estou aqui hoje para abrir a sessão temática que vai apresentar os trabalhos inscritos pelos alunos da Universidade de Tomks, na Rússia. Essa sessão temática faz parte do Simpósio de Pesquisa, Inovação e Pós-graduação, sub-evento que compõe a SECITEC 2022. Nessa sessão temática, exibiremos os vídeos que foram inscritos através da parceria do campus de Juiz de Fora com a Universidade de Tomks, na Rússia. Os vídeos serão apresentados pela professora Helena Constantinova, do Núcleo de Física do IF Sudeste MG, campus de Juiz de Fora. Helena é a responsável por manter tão promissora parceria que já acontece há 7 anos entre nossa instituição e a universidade. Serão exibidos 10 vídeos e antes de cada um deles, a professora Helena fará uma breve introdução. Se alguém quiser deixar algum recado para os apresentadores, pode enviar diretamente para o endereço eletrônico da professora Helena que está na tela. Agradecemos desde já a sua presença, professora. Por favor, fique à vontade.
Obrigado, Geisa, pelas boas palavras e pelo convite. E queria agradecer a todos os ouvintes. Então, desde 2015, nosso campus coopera com Tomsk State Pedagogical University, da Rússia, da Sibéria. Durante esse período, foram realizadas 3 videoconferências conjuntas, nas quais participavam os alunos do ensino médio, do graduação, professores, técnicos informáticos e representantes da direção de 2 países. Nossos professores apresentam trabalhos e publicam artigos em conferências científicas em Tomsk. Neste ano, a direção do TCPU convida estudantes das várias universidades com as quais tem cooperação para participar no evento internacional Jovens Cientistas, que foi realizado de 2 até 16 de novembro deste ano. Os pontos extremos no globo são de universidades de Vietnã e China e, do outro ponto, nosso campus Juiz de Fora. Vários estudantes de graduação e de ensino médio do nosso campus participam neste evento. Agora, os alunos do TCPU participam no nosso evento anual SECITEC, já 5ª vez. Agora vamos estar na sessão do SECITEC, dos alunos do TCPU. As palestras serão em inglês. Espero que todos os ouvintes escutam algo interessante e gostem. Essa palestra vai ser feita pela aluna Elizaveta Kreminska e ela vai falar. O objetivo desse trabalho é estudar as características nacionais de unidades fraseológicas baseadas em zoônimos. Unidades fraseológicas baseadas em zoônimos estão presentes em muitos idiomas. Aqui está comparados só zoônimos de russo e chinês.
Members of the Commission, my name is Kreminska Elizaveta, and now I'm going to present you our research called National Features of Physiological Units based on zoonyms on the material of the Chinese and Russian languages. And first of all, I would like to talk about the relevance of this research. In Russia, it's quite easy to observe the expansion of Chinese culture and especially the Chinese language. Physiology is an essential part of any language, carrying its historic and social peculiarities that sometimes may be pretty obscure to foreigners. Physiological units based on zoonyms are present in many languages, including Russian and Chinese. The national features specify the natural environment the native speakers live in, together with the speaker's attitude to it. That's why we find it really important to observe and study this part of the physiological units based on zoonyms. And talking about the novelty of this research, it was based on a material which hasn't been studied before. In the slide, you can see its title, as well as the first page of it, and an example of how does it look inside. The main purpose of the research was to detect the national features of Russian and Chinese physiological units based on zoonyms, using contrastive and comparative methods to determine the differences in the usage of zoonyms in Russian and Chinese equivalent units. As a result, among 118 pairs of Russian and Chinese equivalent physiological units, we found 23 pairs including zoonyms. In some pairs, only Chinese units include zoonyms and the Russian ones don't. For example, in the unit Hualong Jianjing, which in English means to add the vital finishing touch, in Chinese has a zoonym long, which means dragon. In some pairs, only Russian units include the zoonym part. For example, the unit Яйца курицу не учат, which is in English don't teach your grandmother to suck eggs, and where курицу means chicken. In some pairs, the zoonym is identical. For example, the Chinese units Lao Ma Shui Tu, an old horse North Way, where Ma means horse, has a Russian equivalent Старый конь бразды не спортит, where конь means the same, horse. Some pairs have zoonym, zoonyms in both units, but of different species. For example, in Chinese, Yang Hu Wei Huan, which in English means to indulge one's enemy is asking for trouble, where Hu means tiger, has a Russian equivalent Прикрыть змею на груди, where змею means snake. In some pairs, the zoonyms in both units indicate animals of the same biological taxon, for example, the taxon of birds. Among these pairs of equivalent physiological units, including zoonyms, only one pair has the same zoonym, and it is horse. One pair has zoonyms of same biological taxon, bird. 5 pairs have zoonyms in both units, but they represent different creatures. 10 pairs have zoonyms only in Chinese units, and 6 pairs have zoonyms only in Russian units. We may conclude that the differences of Russian and Chinese natural environment, together with some semblance, greatly influence the national features, peculiarities of physiological units in both languages. And that's all I wanted to present. Thank you for your attention.
Hello, everyone.
Essa palestra vai ser apresentada pelo Verônica Vinogradova. Ela vai falar, pesquisa dela é dedicada a uma análise comparativa do horoscópio chinês e horoscópio eslavo pagão. A relevância desse trabalho de investigação deve-se à crescente popularidade e interesse da população jovem pela astrologia e exoterismo.
My name is Vinogradova Veronika, and today I want to present to you my work, Chinese and Slavic horoscope. Horoscope has become a whole part of every person's life. In my work, I want to consider and compare two completely different horoscopes, Chinese and Slavic. I became interested in the differences because the horoscope is an ordered display of the relative position of the planet in the starry sky at a certain period of time according to the sign of the zodiac. The position of the planets in space is the same, but each nation has its own, and it's very interesting. This study is devoted to the comparative research of the Chinese horoscope and the Slavic horoscope. The relevance of this research work is tied to the growing popularity and interest among the young population in astrology. So, Slavic horoscope. The Slavic horoscope is based on the Slavs' idea of the world around us and its structure. In the Slavic horoscope, there are 3 words: the lower word, knave, the middle word, reality, the upper word, rule. Each of them consists of 9 circles. 3 words and 9 circles are expressed in 27 energies, which has effects on a person. So, Chinese horoscope. The Chinese horoscope is based on 12 years cycle. Each year is associated with an animal. In ancient China, each zodiac animals had its own sign. 12 animals were divided into 6 pairs according to opposite signs, so they achieved yin and yang harmony. The order of animals is not random. It begins with the most important. Differences between the Slavic horoscope and the Chinese. The Slavic horoscope has 16 zodiac signs of the year, and the Chinese horoscope has 12 zodiac signs of the year. So there are signs of time in the Chinese horoscope which plays a more important role than the zodiac sign by month or year. The Chinese horoscope has 5 elements of the person's birthday. So similar elements of the Slavic horoscope in the Chinese. There are 12 characteristics by month in both horoscope system of the Slavic and the Chinese worldview. the common signs of the year, for example, horse or rat, in both horoscope system of the Slavic and the Chinese worldview. So, the horoscope has the same meaning according to the meaning of this word, but in different countries, the horoscope system had different order and names. Also, in the Chinese horoscope, we can see the signs of the zodiac by time and elements of certain years. My work is devoted to comparing two popular horoscopes, Chinese and Slavic. I currently use the two horoscopes, revealed the difference and similarity. Also, I determined what the horoscopes are based on. So that's all about my work. So goodbye. Bye bye.
Hello, I'm Igor.
Agora a terceira apresentação, o nome do palestrante Igor Yakovlev. Ele vai falar sobre iniciativas educacionais dos alunos das universidades pedagógicas. Ele vai falar sobre o conceito da iniciativa e possibilidades para futuros professores das várias universidades pedagógicas na Rússia mostrar essas iniciativas durante os anos de estudo deles.
Yakovlev. I am postgraduate student of the Development of Pedagogical Education of Tomsk State Pedagogical University. The topic of my report is educational initiatives of future teachers in pedagogical universities. Today, research in the field of students' educational initiatives of particular relevance. The purpose of the work is to consider the problem how various pedagogical universities provide future teachers with their educational initiatives. What platforms are being created for this? Recently, research on the problems of formal and informal professional education of future teachers, manifestation of the initiative have become particularly relevant. These students are described in the works of Chernyeva, Babaeva, and many other scientists working in this direction. Formal education is a training that means 5 basic requirements. One of them is a training in institutions specially designed for training. The second, specially trained personnel. Third, leading to the receipt of the general recognized document of education and others. Informal education is understood to spontaneous education, in which individual educational activity manifests itself, accompanying everyday life and not necessarily having a purposeful character. Such spontaneous education is realized those activity, self-initiative, communication, reading, libraries, and etc. The very concept of initiative is defined in the dictionary of the Russian language by Ozhegov, in the etymology dictionary, and many other sources. Thus, initiative is understood as initiative, internal motivation for new forms of activity. Researcher Anisimova understands the pedagogical initiative of a teacher as creative, beyond the scope of official duties, and the activity of teacher, which in turn is aimed at creating a new parties of education. Taking into account these definitions within the framework of educational activities of future teachers, the manifestation of the educational initiative becomes nothing more than, on the one hand, an internal creative motivation of the student, and on the other hand, and external activity expressed act of a trail professional action that goes beyond for his formal academic duties. The professional development of future teachers should be at the university and be close as possible to practice on the real education process. Consider one of the 3 main universities, pedagogical universities in Russia. For example, Tomks State Pedagogical University. There are several sites of the basis of this university. Technopark of universal pedagogical competences. This technopark has modern equipment that allows students to improve their skills and develop. It is very well studied for students to work within the framework of project activities. Coming to this technopark, future teachers can work on the provided requirements during extracurricular hours, self-educate, perform tasks beyond the basic educational program on this university. Such a material and technical base provides huge opportunities for the professional growth of future teachers. Center of Additional Physical and Mathematical and Natural Science Education of Tomsk State Pedagogical University. This center works within the framework of additional education designed to work with school children of almost of all ages. But for students of this university, this is a great platform. On it, they can pass the so-called professional tests, which are not provided for by the main educational program of this university. As part of these trails, the student can choose the course he will teach. Also, within the framework of this center, future teachers can take the initiative in developing educational programs, holding Olympiads and competitions. Thus, the analysis leads to the following conclusions. First, the activity of students within the framework of informal education is relevant, since with its help, students of various pedagogical universities can show their educational initiatives. Second, the professional formation of a future teacher should be during his studies at the university, while being close as possible to the parties of the real educational process. The most relevant is the immersion of students and active pedagogical practice, when it is the student himself who shows the desired initiative. The third, an analysis of the activities pedagogical universities in the framework of providing platforms for students to demonstrate their educational initiatives showed that the process is underway. If we continue to develop this area of activity of universities, it is necessary to look future. They create technologies to activities, such activities of students. They provide them with more and more opportunities of the manifestation of these initiatives. Thank you for the listening. Goodbye.
Татьяна Коломейцева vai falar para nós sobre Irina Papadikina e o realismo mágico. O realismo mágico é muito familiar na cultura latino-americana e o mesmo não poderia ser dito para a Rússia. Irina Papadikina aponta a diferença entre surrealismo e realismo mágico. E ela prova que os romances do escritor russo contemporâneo Dmitry Lipskerov podem ser classificados como realismo mágico.
Hello, my name is Tatiana Kolomeytseva, and I'm very grateful to present you my talk. I study philology at Tomsk State Pedagogical University, and I also have got a PhD degree in history of Russian philosophy. I got this PhD in Yekaterinburg, Russia in 2012. And now I want to present you an article on philology. The title of my article is Irina Popodeykina as a researcher of magical realism. Magical realism is very familiar to Latin American culture. The same cannot be said for Russia. Born in Russia and working in Poland, Irina Popodeykina develops the distinction of this genre of literature. She develops the difference between surrealism and magical realism, and she proves that the novels of contemporary Russian writer Dmitry Lipskirov can be classified as magical realism. So, what makes it possible for Irina to have a long-going and very productive interest to magic realism? The question of magical realism is always a question of boundaries. I turn to the creative biography of Irina Popodeykina to answer it. Irina Popodeykina graduated from Tomsk State Pedagogical University with a specialization in Russian literature in 2009. In 2017, she got her PhD with the thesis about magical realism at the University of Wrocław, Poland. In this way, she gained the experience of studying and researching in the educational systems of two different countries. It's a literal experience of crossing the borders of countries and the borders of worldviews. In 2011, Irina Popodeykina became the chairperson of the foundation, the Polish-Russian Institute in Wrocław, Poland. Various meetings, educational and publishing projects became possible for Russian and Polish researchers with the help of Irina. For instance, she continued to collaborate with her colleagues from Tomsk State Pedagogical University, as well as connecting them with her colleagues in Poland. She was a co-author of many articles with them. She also became a co-organizer of the regular conference Searching the Borders of Fantasy in Wrocław. A lot of researchers from Poland and Russia took part in this conference. A whole community has formed. So, this was an experience of connecting the researchers, and the borders between the countries became the line of contact. Obviously, we have here the vivid perception of borders as a divisive and also unifying factor. This helped her to stay open-minded and creative. In her thesis and articles, Irina Popodeykina gives an excellent knowledge of magical realism in Latin America. And her initiative is to develop the understanding of this notion in close relation to Russian culture. She also mentions the distinction of magic realism's fame in Russia and Poland. In Poland, this aspect is more researched than in Russia. The object of Irina Popodeykina's research is the prose of Dmitry Lipskirov. She builds the evidence base to place his novels in the genre of magical realism. Other articles by Irina Popodeykina are devoted to the works of Olga Tokarczuk and Jean-Paul Sartre. So, we came to the conclusion that Irina Popodeykina's creative biography with her unique experience of overcoming boundaries, became an inspiration of her interest and research of magical realism. Her communication with the colleagues from Tomsk and Wrocław, as well as from other cities of Russia and Poland, helped to organize the whole community of the researchers. And this contributed to her creative biography and to the interest to researching of magical realism. Thank you for listening.
Daria Clemente vai falar para nós sobre ensino de inglês na Rússia. Ela diz que na Rússia de hoje, ao aprender inglês, as crianças são ensinadas a usar letras palitos e não aprendem letras cursivas. Na prática, pelo fato que inglês agora é língua de comunicação acadêmica, os estudantes passam por dificuldades nas universidades. Os alunos precisam gravar palestras rapidamente sob o ditado de palestrantes. Aqui a caligrafia dos alunos fica ilegível e incompreensível e que atrapalha quando eles vão repetir o material que está escrito em seus cadernos.
And participants, my name is Dasha, I'm from Tomsk. I wanted to present my research, handwriting practice in the educational process to you. In my research, I wanted to identify the need of handwriting practice in the educational process. In Russia, particularly, everything is written in block letters, but when we study English at the university, we must record lectures quickly under the dictation of teachers. As part of this work, I surveyed my peers. My survey was among 20 friends. Because of my survey, all 20 people answered capital letters as the best way to write, and they cannot imagine life without it. Also, they were interested in how I studied the Faculty of Origin Languages. I record lectures in block letters. In conclusion, I wanted to say that handwriting practice is a relevant topic for development in Russia. I have learned to write since early childhood, and I cannot imagine life without writing. Besides the importance of this topic for adults, I would like to know that writing is also interesting for children. Practice your handwriting, it could be useful for your studying. Thank you for your attention.
Agora, Lina Hoffman. O estudo dela é dedicado à influência das redes sociais e o fato que todos os adolescentes estão constantemente navegando na internet e utilizando diversas redes sociais. Existem algumas vantagens e desvantagens dessa situação. Claro, as redes sociais expandem o círculo social dos adolescentes, mas, ao mesmo tempo, afetam negativamente o desenvolvimento dos adolescentes.
Hey, my name is Lina. I'm from Tomsk, and I want to present to you my research, the impact of social media on teenagers. The relevance of this work lies because all teenagers are constantly surfing the internet and using different social networks. There are some advantages and disadvantages. Currently, dependence of social networks is becoming an epidemic, and we must make research on this problem. My purpose is to study the influence of social networks on teenagers. As part of this work, I have carried out a study, the purpose of which is to assess the influence of social networks on teenagers at our school. 85% of respondents think that children replace actual communication with virtual and can communicate with dangerous people and waste their free time. More time spent on the internet and social networks has negative effect. Of course, everything has advantages and disadvantages. You need to remember that everything had to be done with a sense of proportion, including using the internet. But we think social networks have become a disease. At the moment, it's difficult to find a teenager who wouldn't register on any social network. The worst thing is everyone knows the internet is harmful to health and takes a lot of time. Teenagers can't imagine their lives without the internet. This problem is very important for the present time and requires more attention. Thank you for listening and good luck.
Ora, Sofia Ermishna. A palestra dela aborda o tema da tradução de nomes próprios em obras. Os autores gostam de adicionar um significativo especial aos nomes de seus heróis, usar nomes ou sobrenomes com significação especial. Nesse caso, o tradutor precisa transmitir isso sentido aos leitores de diferentes partes do mundo. Esse é um tema muito importante e interessante no mundo literário.
Hello, my name is Sofia Yermishna. May I present the results of my research, the problem of adapting names in literary translation exemplified by the Harry Potter book series. Literature and linguistics are inseparable, as literature uses language as a means of creating works of art. Translation of fiction is already a difficult task, not to mention the adaptation of personal naming. The most serious challenge for a translator of fiction are the Tolkien names and surnames. The author may put some special meaning in the name of a character, and the main purpose of a translator thus must be to retain these features. The book series Harry Potter, which is known to almost every child in our world, was a tough challenge for Russian translators, a series replete with many Tolkien proper names. The purpose of this research is to study the most frequent and curious examples of name adaptation in the translation and describe their original meaning and the impact of translation equivalence on the story understanding. During the research, we used linguistic, descriptive, comparative, morphological, and general scientific methods, analysis and synthesis. The material of the study was 10 different character names and surnames. We compared 2 translations of the book series and analyzed how they conveyed the meanings of the names in the story. Analysis of name translation has shown that 2 trends prevail in the study of names in literature, linguistic and literary. There is a rule among translators not to translate proper names, and by doing translators using linguistic method, translators can transliterate or transcribe proper names. However, in some cases, especially in fiction, where every word has a meaning, this method is not quite suitable because the author wants the reader to understand the character's features, even during the very first mentioning. Thus, when children read about the actions of Madame Hooch, which in some slangs means twist, maneuver, or Professor Quirrell, whose surname resonates with the word quiver, they recognize the person's type of activity or character right away. In the Russian translations, you can see that different shades of names' meaning are verbalized in different translations. Other examples of such cases are also presented here. To sum up, the study shows that translators should be aware of possible mistakes in the translations of the characters' names, as they always have a lot of sense throughout the story. Readers always patiently wait for the translation of their favorite book, and painstaking work over lexical phonetic structures of the language surely can make this possible. Thus, readers will get an interesting story which loses almost nothing when everything is translated diligently. Thank you for your attention.
Renata Votinova vai falar sobre gírias juventil. Então, ela apresentará as principais características e funções da gíria juventil inglesa e analisará os principais modelos de formação de palavras das unidades de gíria.
Everyone, I'm Renata Votinova, and today I would like to tell you about features and functions of English slang. My article describes the main features and functions of English slang. The presented work illustrates the different points of view of several scientists on the definition of the concept of slang. The science and causes of the emergence of slang in modern English are considered. Word formation models of slang units within the framework of slang of young people are studied, and the composition of parts of speech of this type of slang is also considered. The purpose of my article is to analyze the composition of slang in parts of speech and the ways of the formation of these words in order to determine the features of the composition and functioning of slang, especially the slang of young people in modern English. The methods of this research are the analysis and the synthesis of theoretical information, as well as the continuous sampling method when selecting the analyzed material and the classification method for particle research. The material of the presented research is the thematic forums of the discussion website Reddit. The main topic were funny, politics, and gaming. As a result of working on this research, we were able to receive, during the analysis, 75 slang units were identified. First of all, it's necessary to evaluate the composition of the identified lexical units within the parts of speech. All these words are divided into 4 categories: nouns, adjectives, verbs, and functional words. Nouns are 58% in English slang of young people. 25% are adjectives, 12% are verbs, and only 5% are functional words. The second classification of slang units is based on the way they are formed. So, examples of affixation, word composition, conversion, abbreviations, distortion of the graphic form of the word, as well as metaphorization of the meaning of the word were identified. For example, only 20% were affixation, 6% was conversion, metaphorization was 16%, word composition was 22%, and 24% were abbreviations, and also distortion of the graphic form of the word was 12%. Well, the analysis of the corpus of slang units showed that the most significant group of slangism are slang units nouns, 58%. This prevalence of nouns in slang is due to the fact that slang is often used for nomination, and it's nouns that perform this function in speech. 25% of all identified slang units are adjectives. They are used to express the characteristics of the described objects or even people. Well, in addition, the analysis shows that the most common word formation models are word composition, 22%, affixation, 20%, and metaphorization of meaning, 16%. These word formation methods make it possible to form new slang units. Thank you very much for your attention.
Samira Samuratova vai falar sobre bem-estar. Bem-estar é um conceito amplo e abrange uma gama das habilidades psicológicas e físicas. Bem-estar é o estado de saúde e felicidade. Inclui saúde mental, física, segurança física e emocional, um sentimento de pertencimento, senso de propósito, realização e sucesso. O bem-estar é importante na escola, porque nas escolas os alunos fazem uma escolha de estilo da vida deles.
I would like to present an article about emotional well-being in school. What is well-being? Well-being is experience of health and happiness. It includes mental and physical health, physical and emotional safety, and a feeling of belonging, sense of purpose, achievement, and success. Well-being is a broad concept and covers a range of psychological and physical abilities. Emotional well-being is the ability to be resilient, manage one's emotions, and generate emotions that lead to good feelings. Physical well-being, the ability to improve the functioning of one's body through healthy eating and good exercise habits. And social well-being is the ability to communicate, develop meaningful relationships with others, and create one's own emotional support network. Why is well-being important at school? Well-being is important at school because schools have an essential role to play in supporting students to make healthy lifestyle choices and understand the effects of their choices on their health and well-being. Childhood is a critical period in the development of long-term attitudes towards personal well-being and lifestyle choices.
The social and emotional skills, knowledge, and behaviors that young people learn in the classroom help them build resilience and set the pattern for how they will manage their physical and mental health throughout their lives. Schools are able to provide students with reliable information and deepen their understanding of the choices they face. They are also able to provide students with the intellectual skills required to reflect critically on these choices and on the influences that society brings to bear on them, including through peer pressure, advertising, social media, and family and cultural values. Physical activity is associated with improved learning and the ability to concentrate. Well-being is also important for developing important democratic competences. Positive emotions are associated with the development of flexibility and adaptability, openness to other cultures and beliefs. What are the challenges? One of the challenges of trying to promote young people's well-being in school is the multifaceted nature of well-being. It requires the development of a culture of well-being throughout the whole school and the active involvement of the whole staff, teaching and non-teaching, which can be difficult to achieve. The promotion of well-being may sometimes appear to conflict with other school priorities, such as academic standards, unreasonably high expectation, a regime of constant testing, or an overemphasis on the importance of academic performance may actually undermine student well-being. In many cases, schools do not have the freedom to make the changes to school life which might most benefit student well-being. What happens in the home and the family, local communities, or social media can have as much, if not more, influence on student well-being as anything in school. Finally, developing a sense of well-being in students is made all the more difficult when school staff themselves do not have a positive sense of well-being. Results of diagnostics of school children on the third grade of school number 16. Field school anxiety results. 7 students of third grade have an increased level of anxiety. 2 students have a high level of anxiety, and 15 students have normal level of anxiety. How can schools get active? Addressing student well-being at school begins with helping students feel they are each known and valued as an individual in her or his own right, and that school life has a meaning and purpose for them. This can be achieved in a variety of small ways, the cumulative effect of which can have a very powerful influence on students' sense of well-being. This includes, first of all, providing opportunities for all members of the school community to participate in meaningful decision-making in school. For example, through consultations, opinion surveys, electing class representatives, students' parliaments, focus groups, and so on. Developing a welcoming environment where everyone at school can feel supported and safe through access to meaningful activities. For example, clubs, interest groups, and associations dealing with issues of concern to young people, including health. Then, taking steps to reduce the anxiety students feel about examinations and testing through the introduction of less stressful forms of assessment. For example, formative assessment, peer assessment, and involving students in the identification of their own assessment needs. Using teaching methods that contribute to a positive classroom climate and well-being. For example, cooperative learning, student-centered methods, self-organized time, and outdoor activities. Finding curriculum opportunities to talk about well-being issues with students. For example, healthy eating, exercise, substance abuse, positive relationships. Integrating democratic citizenships and education for intercultural understanding into different school subjects and extracurricular activities. For example, openness to other cultures in religious education, knowledge and critical understanding of human rights in social science, empathy in literature. Introducing students lack forms of conflict management and approach to bullying and harassment. For example, peer meditation, restorative justice. Improving the physical environment of the school to make it more student-friendly, for example, new furniture and fittings, carpet areas, appropriate color schemes, and safe toilet areas, recreational areas. Encouraging healthier eating by providing healthy options in the school canteen. For example, avoiding high amounts of sugar, saturated fats, and salt. And finally, working with parents to enhance students' achievement and sense of purpose in school. For example, on healthy food, safe internet use, and homeschool communications. Individual initiatives like these can be brought together at the whole school level through a policy development process which mainstreams well-being as a school issue. This means giving attention to the potential effects of new policies on individual well-being of students, teachers, and others. Addressing student well-being at school always goes hand in hand with action to protect the health and well-being of teachers and other staff at school. Thank you for your attention.
Alexandre Grudachov. Alexandre Grudachov vai falar sobre os contos folclóricos. Contos folclóricos são uma das formas mais antigas de criatividade falada entre todos os povos. Elas estão conectadas com ideias sobre mundo, bem, mal, justiça. Quando nós aprendemos uma língua estrangeira, também tentamos aprender cultura desse país. A análise comparativa de culturas é um aspecto essencial da comunicação intercultural. Entre os contos de diferentes países existem características familiares e não familiares. Por exemplo, existem tramas típicas, os mesmos tipos de protagonistas, os mesmos objetos mágicos.
My name is Alexander Grudachov, and my research is called Comparison of the Cultural Component of English and Russian Folktales. Folktales are one of the oldest and most widespread forms of spoken creativity among all peoples. The works that have survived until today reflect the people's cultural and geographical phenomena. They are also connected with ideas about the world, good, evil, and justice. When we learn a foreign language, we strive for successful communicative interaction with representatives of foreign cultures. Comparative analysis of culture is an essential aspect of intercultural communication. Between the tales of different countries, there are both familiar and non-familiar features. Although there are typical plots, the same types of protagonists, the same magical objects. The main purpose of the study is to study the cultural features of English and Russian folklore texts. As a material and methods, we have linguistic methods, for example, descriptive and comparative, and general scientific methods, analysis and synthesis. And the material of the study was Russian and English folktales and fairy tales. Many linguists analyze the question of the relationship between language and mentality. Poeva emphasizes the relationship, the oldest ideas about the world and recorded in folklore and mythology influence the formation and reflection of mentality. Features of the national mentality can be traced in English and Russian folktales, and there are features characteristics of the English and Russian cultural types. In the 10 English folktales analyzed, personal identity predominates. In the personal sentences, a person appears as the main character. Although, therefore, the English culture is characterized by features of individualism, the British value their own rights and freedom. Moreover, one can understand that the British have spread a culture of high personal performance for many centuries. They believe that they influence their real life and that only they can change it. If we compare the English and Russian languages, there are differences in the social attitudes of representatives of different cultures. Structures in Russian tales like "it feels like," "we believe," show that events occur without a person's active participation. On the other hand, individualistic motives characterize English culture, and most sentences begin with the pronoun I. It is also worth noting that in English folk tales, the pronoun I is used more frequently than we. In the analyzed folk tales, the pronoun we occurs 30 times, while I occurs 183 times. Russian mentality has a collective character. Instead, a Russian person will always share sorrow and joy with his loved ones. The Russian soul clarifies that a Russian person will put support and advice above his or her desires and will. The importance of close communication expressed in the fairy tale Geese Swans. Whenever the girl helped her brother out of a predicament, she was helped by a milk river, an apple tree, or a straw. It is also noteworthy that the characters always act together and help each other. Thus, Alyonushka rescues her brother Ivanushka, Ivan Tsarevich rescues the frog princess, and in the folk tale about the turnip, the theme of mutual help and joy and work becomes clear. Grandmother for grandfather, grandfather for the turnip, and so on. That cannot be said about English folk tales, in which the protagonist solves the problems himself. The love of freedom and autonomy is reflected in the behavior of the British, and they are characterized by non-interference in personal life and respect for personal boundaries. The British have a respectful attitude towards nature. They believe living in harmony with nature is necessary, and they are proud of its beauty. Moreover, in fairy tales, there are often such words as tree, mountain, lake, and river. The folklore characters of English literature have unusual motives, and they rarely try to reach high to gain wealth. On the contrary, the protagonists of fairy tales go in search of happiness with enthusiasm, and their positive attitude allows them to go to the end without feeling down. This characteristic manifests not only the active type of English culture, but also the masculine characteristic of society, ambition, and the desire to pursue the set goals. Dumbness and impracticality can coexist harmoniously with benevolence, morality, and decency is an English character. For example, in the fairy tale Tom Tit Tot, the main character is not so smart girl who finds a way out of her situation by finding an excellent helper. As for emotion, characters tend to suppress them and not show their feelings, especially negative ones. If the protagonist is offended, he will not tell his interlocutor about his feelings because most sensations are stored in the person. The Russian character is characterized by a strong reflection on all important issues. As a rule, the protagonists of fairy tales don't make quick decisions, but assess the situation rationally, consult with their relatives, and above all, plan the next action. Thus, in a Russian fairy tale, the thought, "you better go to bed, the morning is wiser than the evening," is often found. If we analyze the behavior and character of fairy tales characters, we can see such qualities as kindness and mercy. For example, in fairy tales, there is an episode in which the main character good-naturedly releases the animal and listens to its plea. Yemelia let the pike return to the ice hole and went to fetch the buckets. Accordingly, such features of the Russian character as gratitude, appreciation, and a sense of duty can be traced. In conclusion, we should say it should be noted that English and Russian folklore reflects many features of their country's mentality. Therefore, folk tales are a reliable source for studying the basics of intercultural communication. Texts bearing the national coloring of a country help to overcome the difficulties associated with misunderstanding cultural differences. Thank you for your attention.
Esses foram os trabalhos da Universidade de Tomks que fizeram parte do Simpósio de Pesquisa, Inovação e Pós-graduação de 2022. Em nome da Diretoria de Pesquisa, Inovação e Pós-graduação do IF Sudeste MG Campus de Juiz de Fora, parabenizamos todos os alunos pelos trabalhos apresentados. Agradecemos à Universidade de Tomsk pela parceria e agradecemos mais uma vez à professora Helena pela presença, colaboração e cooperação. Desejamos a todos uma ótima noite.